Hobby Show. I got a special guest here today that I'm super excited about. I've known him for the last 14 years of my life. The man has announced, or actually is in the announcing, Georgia Auto Racing Hall of Fame. He has taught actually history of auto racing at Brenau University, has worked in NASCAR or worked with NASCAR for 14 years. He's even traveled to China to do some work for him. He's celebrating his 50th year in television/radio broadcasting this week. I've known him for the last 15 years. The man, the myth, the legend, Charles Head. How you doing today, Charles?
I'm great, Kyron. Let me start off by saying, man, I miss seeing you at the racetrack. Nobody better and faster than you in that 22 car, and I just miss seeing you out there on a regular basis on the racetrack.
Yeah, I tell you what, at all the announcers I've listened to in the racing days that I've been there, I've always loved listening to yours. We still listen to old radio shows and that we've recorded, all the exciting things that I've done and you have been a part of in the last 14 years. So I do miss being out there. This is the best way that I can bring it back. But man, we had some good times, that's for sure.
Yep, sure did. A lot of great memories, and hope to see you back out there someday. I think you still got a lot of good years of racing left in you.
I try to keep some in the tank here and there. I go up to the go-kart track, do like 6, 8, 12-hour races just to keep a little bit in there, just in case if something ends up happening in the future. But man, I got to start off with simple stuff. The show's about you, and you got a background that I'm super excited to hear about tonight. I'm going to start off fresh. How'd you get into announcing? Were you started doing racing?
No, it was a chance encounter. Everything in life seems to be like just right place, right time. And I was announcing at a local radio station, and I also raced. I raced a 55 Chevrolet, and I built my own race car, but I got the itch so bad I couldn't wait on finishing my own race car. So I bought, get this, a race-ready 55 Chevrolet for $75, and I took it to Toccoa Speedway, and I ran it 4 times, and then the announcer who was at the racetrack, I was 20 years old. This was in 1974. I was 20 years old, and the announcer who was at the racetrack had an accident in his family. His house caught on fire, and his baby was badly burned. And so they asked me, would I sit in for him until he came back? Well, his baby was in intensive care for several weeks and then ultimately died. And so he never came back. And so that's how I got into race announcing, and I've just been doing it ever since. So 46 years down the road, and I'm still announcing at 4 different racetracks every weekend.
So the announcing, so when you were doing it back then, it was still about auto racing, or was it just a normal radio show?
No. I was actually I was a disc jockey. And I was also chief engineer. See, I went to school for electronics engineering, so I was the chief engineer at a number of different radio stations. And I also had a gig on the air every day that I did a midday shift, just playing rock music during the day. But I started announcing in 1970, when I was a sophomore in high school, radio announcing. I started radio announcing then, and this is a crazy thing too. Back then, I did what my teachers told me to do, and we used to go around the room, and everybody would read a paragraph in English class. I don't know if they still do that today or not, but we read a paragraph, and when I got done with my paragraph, I'm 10th grade in high school. Ms. Vaughn, my English teacher, said, "You read so well, you ought to be a radio announcer." So what did I do? I went home that afternoon and called the radio station, and I said, "My English teacher tells me I should be a radio announcer." And they said, "Well, luckily for you, we've got an opening on an afternoon teen rock and roll show called Teen Time." They said, "The guy's going off to college, and we need somebody." So on October 9th, 1970, 50 years ago, I started my radio career as a little afternoon DJ while in the 10th grade in high school.
Wow, that is awesome. So you went from going from an English class all the way to a radio show. When they were doing it, that teen show, was it just like you said, normal music, or just 70s stuff, or?
We're talking 70s, yeah, late 60s, early 70s, because we're talking 1970. So we still played stuff from back in 69 that was top hits, and then into 70. And I remember the first songs I played on the radio. You'll get a kick out of this. The FCC is not listening to this, so I can say this without a problem. It's not really that bad, but the first song I played on the radio was Blood, Sweat, and Tears. It was a song called Lucretia McEvil. And right at one point in the middle of the song, David Clayton Thomas said, "Lucy, you just so damn bad." Well, as soon as he did, lightning hit our tower and knocked us off the air. And I thought for sure that because he said that on the radio that the
Cut you off.
FCC had kicked us off and I was done. My radio career was over. The FCC was going to pull my license. And all it was just a lightning strike that cut us off the air for a moment. But that's the very first song I ever played on the radio.
Oh my God. Yeah, that would probably give me a panic attack too. That's the whole. So as you know, I did the drone thing for a long time, that's actually what got me into doing video work. And the more and more I did it, it was just there's so much legality at it, and I just thought, man, I'm gonna get in trouble. I'm gonna get in trouble. And I had one time I brought my drone to a drag track, actually Greer, and there was a big event. I got a buddy, he invited me there and stuff like that. And there was a cop running around. I was flying my drone for the event, and he goes, "Do you have the commercial license for this?" And I was like, "No, I'm just doing this just for fun." He goes, "Well, I do, so why don't you bring yours down?" And I'm like, "Nope, that's it. You're right. I apologize. I messed up." So and I never got in trouble. He said, "No, it's no big deal." He goes, "I just wanted to fly my drone. I'm just giving you a hard time." I'm like, "Yeah, but you put a good scare in me where it's a lot different." So I know exactly what you mean. So
absolutely.
So were you racing? You were racing on the weekends, but still doing the radio show during the week. Is that correct?
That's right. And I was reporting on the races. When I first started in 1970, the first day that I was there, I got a press pass. And I realized how important that press pass was because I could then get in Toccoa Speedway on Saturday night free. And so I started going. So my first day on radio was on a Friday. On Saturday night, I covered the races at Toccoa Speedway because, I mean, I'd grown up at that racetrack anyway. So it's not like it was foreign to me. I mean, I was there every Saturday night. So now I was all of a sudden the press, and I was there and I covered it, and I went back to the station and recorded about 2 a.m. I recorded a little blurb so they could use it on the Sunday morning news and sports about the winners at Toccoa Speedway. So I actually started race reporting the second day I was on the air.
That's hilarious that you say that. So, kind of the same scenario happened is, I don't know, I think you were announcing at Livonia Speedway when I first started racing there when I was 12. But I can't even think of the... Brad York. Brad York was the promoter at the time. And we were traveling from Florida to South Carolina, or to Georgia, technically. We lived in South Carolina. But we were traveling from Florida to Georgia every other weekend just to race because I was too young to race down in Florida. So when I first started doing it or got there, whatever, we talked with Brad York, and he goes, "Man, I appreciate you guys traveling this far," because there was not a lot of young drivers out there, so he really encouraged it. And he goes, "I'll make you guys a deal. I'll give you guys a couple entry fees that help you with the travel. That's the least I could do." And I was like, "Man, I greatly appreciate it. That's awesome." Well, my third race ever, I ended up finishing third out of a 20-car field. Luck. I want to say it's skill, but I go with more luck. But we finished third. After that, he goes, "I think you're doing pretty good right now, so we might have to hold off on the passes." I was like, "That's fair." I said, "Fair game. I greatly appreciate it." So I know what that means. So you were back. Were you getting race ready during the week as well? Do you go in after hours after you get off the show and then get your car ready?
Oh man, I did it in the backyard in the barn. I mean, that was my race shop, was the barn. And so I was getting my car ready, as ready as you could get it. Now, let me say this. Back in those days, when you were running those things, we just get parts out of the junkyard. There were no high-performance parts in anything that we were racing whatsoever. So you just work on it during the week. And, of course, you're young and dumb at 19, 20 years old. So you're out there till 3:30 or 4 in the morning, and you pop back up out of bed and go to work at 9 o'clock on radio. So that's the kind of things we did back in those days.
I was going to ask, you said there was race ready. What is the definition of race ready back then? Race ready nowadays is race ready, but back
means
then
it was hold out and it had roll bars in it. And that's it. That's race ready.
That's a race ready.
Yeah.
So you were doing your first track was Toccoa back then. What has changed between back then to now when it came to Toccoa?
Well, the configuration of the track hasn't changed at all, but everything around that track has changed tremendously. As you know, Mike Davidson and Jackie Davidson have done a tremendous job. They've raised all the buildings that were there. They were pretty much junk back in it's a 65-year-old track. So every structure that was there was 60 years old when the Davidsons took it over.
Yeah.
they've rebuilt everything. They've moved things around. They've made it a really nice area now. There's no more trampling around in the mud between the grandstands and the concession stands. It's all concrete. So a lot of upgrades have been made, even though the actual track itself has remained the same. Mr. Garland Sheriff, who built that racetrack, was actually a very close friend of my father's. So we spent a lot of time at Toccoa Speedway back as kids and when we were growing up and as teenagers. That was my Saturday night place to be, was always at Toccoa. And Mr. Sheriff, when he first designed the track, it was just a pure oval. It was just a quarter-mile track. And then they elongated it with that kind of D back straightaway. They elongated it out to make it a 5/16 track, and that gives you, as you know, it gives you a great opportunity to accelerate off turn number 2 and not worry about hitting the wall like you do coming off 3 into or 4 into 1.
Yeah. Oh, that D. I remember going to Toccoa for the first time. My dad did not want to go to Toccoa, which Toccoa was actually the first track he's ever been to in Georgia, which was funny. But he never wanted me to go. He was too scared of it. He goes, "Nah, it's a demolition. He goes, it's a demolition derby there," which is what he described. Again, we'd never been there, and I was going to Travelers Rest a lot at the time. It was like Livonia, Travelers Rest, Livonia, Travelers Rest, and one night it rained out at Travelers Rest and Livonia. Basically, there was nowhere racing except Toccoa. So we called Hot Rod LeMans, and we said, "Hey, we're going to come down there, try out Toccoa for the first time." He goes, "Man, I got you a spot. I'll save it right next to me." So we went down there, and I remember going on the track for practice. We just went out there. Like, we'd missed practice, had to go straight to qualifying. And that D really, that's the track. If I had to describe anything of Toccoa, it's that D. And I coming off of 2, yeah, it gave you a little bit of cushion, a little bit of leeway, but going into 3 is what
there's so much speed.
Oh my goodness, that's what I love about it. And the funny part was, and it wasn't, that's where he said he was a demolition derby. He was afraid of it because how small of a track it is, but it flows so well that you can go 2-3 wide easily there with some fantastic racing. I know, especially like I said, going into 3, I've passed outside, 2 guys were racing each other, and I still was able to get around on the outside going around 3 and 4. So it's definitely got the room. But man, yeah, Toccoa is by far one of my favorite tracks.
Somebody asked me one time after my first race, they said, "What did it feel like being in a race car?" And honestly, the thing that came to mind to me was, I said, it feels like you're on a motorcycle with your helmet on and you're between a big stand of trees on either side of the road, because that's the way it feels like, because you got the bank and you're tilted toward the bank on the inside bank, and then the outside you've got a big red clay bank there too, and it just gives you that feeling like you're on your motorcycle with your helmet on between 2 big stands of trees. That was sort of the impression I got the first time I ever went out on that racetrack.
Yeah. Oh, and between the banking, like going into 3, I remember breathing going across the flag stand. I would actually take a breath at that time. The rest of it, I'm just like, just honing it down, because man, that banking is amazing. So
David McCoy has told me once before that he has to remind himself to breathe at the flag stand on every lap.
Yes,
because he said you'll wind up and you wind up out of breath because you're holding on for dear life. And he said every time I pass the flag stand, it reminds me to take a breath.
Yep, I know how many times it took me a long time to get relaxed enough at Toccoa that I could take a breath on the backstretch. It took a long time, but there's still some times, especially when you're running too wide, you feel like if you take a breath, you're going to mess up. So you might as well just hold it in.
Well, I was going to tell you one more story about McCoy, and I think I may have told you about this. The night you had your drone there, you were trying to see how low you could get it over the cars without the air disturbing the drone. And McCoy told me, he said, I drove to turn 1, and he said, I literally ducked in the race car. I didn't know what that was, and he said, I ducked because I saw that thing right over my top of my car and didn't know what it was.
The drone was awesome. I got some amazing shots of the drone, and I'm excited when every time I took it, and even looking at the old footage. And I like seeing the shots that people are doing now. Like I see a lot of drones at these tracks, and it's cool to see. I still don't see anybody putting it where I put it. Not bragging, but those are some amazing shots. But it took a risk. It was a big risk, but well worth the reward. So how did you go from racing every weekend? You still did the radio show and everything like that, but what Why'd you quit? Why'd you quit racing and just go straight to announcing?
Well, I was not very good for one thing. I was a pretty pitiful racer, and I had subpar equipment. I mean, for $75, you don't get real good quality. But anyway, and so I wound up. I sold my race cars because I started announcing, and all of a sudden, I was leaving the track with $50 in my hand instead of spending money every week on a race car. And I did what I enjoyed, and I felt like I was pretty good at it. I felt like it was something I should pursue, and so I just have. Let me tell you, the first race I announced. I don't know if this name rings a bell to you or not. Charlie Mize. That's David Smith's grandfather.
Yep.
Charlie was the scorer, and he and I sat in the tower there at Toccoa together. Front row, Bud Lunsford and Buck Simmons. Second row, Charles Barrett and Doug Kennemer. And in the third row, it was Jody Ridley and Charlie Hughes. All of them now are members of the Georgia Racing Hall of Fame, and that was the first late model race that I announced. Was those stars just regular weekly drivers?
Wow, that to see the competition back then and what it is now. I'm not saying now is bad, but to see, like you said, all those Hall of Famers to be racing back then, especially where's that at? That was at Toccoa, or was that?
That was at Toccoa, yeah.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah. You mentioned Hot Rod Le Mans a moment ago. Listeners and viewers may want to know this. I write for the Georgia Racing Hall of Fame magazine, and in December, I'm doing a big article on Hot Rod Le Mans. We're making a push now to get Hot Rod inducted into the Georgia Racing Hall of Fame. Even though he's a South Carolinian, he has won so many races in Georgia that we are pushing for him to get in the Hall of Fame, and that will be his introduction to all the Hall of Fame voting members, is that article that I write on him in the December issue.
Wow, that's gonna be big for Hot Rod. I raced with him a lot. He's helped me grow up in the sport, and I did look up to him for a long time and still do. And for him to get that much praise is gonna be super awesome in December. So it's getting announced in December.
No, it'll just be an article I write on him in December. They'll vote on the Hall of Fame members later on in the year. I'm just kind of introducing Hot Rod to people in the state who may not know him, that are not from North Georgia. They may not be familiar with the name Hot Rod Le Mans. So I'm trying to do that. Another quick story about Hot Rod. I was announcing at Hartwell. This is a whole bunch of years ago. And I was announcing at Hartwell, and I did a T-shirt giveaway or some kind of giveaway down in front of the grandstand. And I said, I got this T-shirt for the first person that can tell me what Hot Rod Le Mans' real name is. And I didn't even know the answer. I was just giving a T-shirt away. And somebody in the audience said, Steve. And I said, no, I think his name is David. And she said, I've been married to him for 38 years. I think it's Steve. And I said, I bow to you. Turns out that was Teresa. And so she pretty much knew what his name was.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because once you just said that, I sat there and be like, the only reason that it hit me in the brain was because of Facebook, because it says Steve Hot Rod Le Mans. That's the only thing, because everybody knows him as Hot Rod.
See, this was Facebook probably existed, but we weren't all on Facebook back in those days.
Yeah.
And so I had no idea. I was just asking a question I didn't know the answer to. I do that many times from the tower. First person that walks up and tells me anything, I hand them the T-shirt or whatever. I don't know what the answer is.
You're giving away your secrets? You can't be.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so I was reading back. We were going over some notes, and as long as I've known you, you're the nicest guy in the world. Very friendly, very easy to talk to. Can bring out stories from anybody. But back then, when you were younger and you were racing, you actually got kicked out of a track, specifically Hartwell.
Yeah.
That you've announced that. So how did that come to be?
Well, I was Brad York, his uncle, Horace York. I was on his pit crew. We're talking about 1972. In 1972, I was on their pit crew. And this guy had spun Horace out during hot laps a couple of different times. And then in the first heat race, he spun him out again down in turn one. Well, Horace's car came to rest down there, and the other guy stopped on the racetrack. Well, of course, Horace jumped out of his car and went and started wailing on the guy. Well, he jumps out of the car, and then everybody starts pulling out onto the track. I mean, there was no stopping the crowd that was going out to be in the fight. So Leonard Payne, who was Horace's Mike Payne, you may know Mike. You probably raced against Mike.
Yep.
Mike's dad, Leonard, was the crew chief, and Leonard grabbed his rifle and said, grab the tire tool and let's go. So we all head down to turn one, Leonard with his rifle and me with this big old tire tool, and the fight finally got calmed down. Nobody fired anything. I didn't hit anybody. I was just we all got calmed down. And about that time, some kid walked up, and of course, nobody had racing suits back then. Horace raced in his overalls, and he had a rip in his overalls. So he had a string hanging down. So he took his pocket knife out and was going to cut the string. And some 10-year-old kid or something said, "He's got a knife," and pushed Horace in the mud. Well, it was on again. Here he comes up swinging with his knife. And before you know it, they had called the sheriff, and the sheriff comes down. And the sheriff watched us load the car up and escorted us between two deputies out to the main road and watched us leave. And he said, "Y'all are banned from Hartwell Speedway for life." So in 1992, 20 years later, Mike Adams called me and said, "I want you to come announce a Sunday night race for me at Hartwell." And I said, "Mike, I've been banned by the sheriff. I'm not allowed to ever come back to Hartwell again." He said, "Oh, don't worry about that. Come on back." So I've been pretty much at Hartwell and Toccoa and Livonia ever since. I'm still at all three racetracks right now.
Wow. You're so it was still was an accident though. Something. It's not like you got overly aggressive. It just wrong place at the wrong time would be something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I was just caught up in somebody else's mess, and I really never hit anybody. I was just part of the crew, and they sent the whole crew out. So I was officially banned for life. And I think there's some other drivers that I know of. I won't mention their names that have been banned for life, and they've come back too. So I don't think it's too big an issue for a sheriff to ban you for life and you still come back.
I mean, yeah, stuff definitely happens. So I was seeing that you worked with NASCAR for 14 years. What were you doing
Yeah.
for NASCAR for those 14 years?
Oh, I was announcing. I was track announcer, and I did all the driver introductions. I did all the victory lanes, and one of the coolest memories of that, one that is very personal to me, is I was announcing at Atlanta, and I was doing the driver intros. And back then, I stood when I first started doing it. I stood on the stage. Let me tell you this story first. I actually stood on the stage, and the drivers would come up when I would introduce them, and they would shake hands with me. And of course, Miss Winston and whoever else was there, but they would shake hands with me, and then they would go on down the line, and of course, the fans would wave at them and whatever. So I introduced Jeff Gordon, and I had just introduced Earnhardt, and Earnhardt Sr. And then Jeff Gordon was right behind him, and I introduced Jeff, and the fans just booed Jeff like crazy because that was being in the time when he was winning everything.
Which track
And
was this? Do you remember?
this is Atlanta.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is in the old configuration of Atlanta before they turned it around, though. So we're talking 94, 95, 96, somewhere in that range. And I told Gordon, I said, "My wife's your biggest fan. She hopes you win today." And he said, "Well, it sounds like she's the only one." And he was rather pitiful. And Earnhardt leaned over to him, and I heard him say this to him. He said, "Boy, don't worry about it when they boo you. Worry about it when they introduce you and nobody says nothing." And that just always stuck with me. Whether they're booing or whether they're cheering, at least they're making noise.
That's correct.
And so, anyway, my favorite memory is years later, and they had then positioned me down beside the stage. So I introduced the drivers, and they would walk up the stage, and they would wave to all the beauty queens and the Miss Winstons or Miss Nextel or whoever was up there at the time. And Dale Earnhardt Sr. pulls my script out of my hand. Well, I didn't need the script. I knew who was starting next. I knew what hometown they were from. I knew all their sponsors. I knew who they were, and I just kept on going. And he was standing beside Darrell Waltrip, and he looked at Waltrip and kind of hit him in the arm and said, "Oh, boy's pretty good, ain't he?" And I will never take anything for being considered a peer of Dale Earnhardt and his respect for me. And he was always extremely nice to me anytime I was around him. Only driver who's ever asked me when I was going to interview him, he's the only driver who's ever asked me, "What side do you want me to stand on, your left or your right?" And it threw me for a loop. Nobody had ever asked me that. And I said, "Actually, I would like you on my right, because I'm left-handed with a microphone, and that way I can turn it towards you, and I go, rather than being like this, I can put it across my body and hold it better for you."
Yeah.
And he's the only person who's ever asked me that. And I thought, how odd for the intimidator to be so concerned about me that he asked me what side would I rather him be on to interview him. Nobody's ever done that before or since.
Wow. That's, yeah, to be in the presence of a guy like that, to be able to talk to a guy like that's another thing, but the guy that acknowledged you on that side of it is definitely a lot more personable. And for him to have that respect. Now, you got to be pretty good to know that whole list of stuff. So were you hanging around the NASCAR? Were you actually announcing from track to track to track, traveling around the U.S.?
I did several different tracks. I stayed within the SMI family of tracks.
Okay.
and but I primarily did Atlanta. I did a little work at Darlington, a little work at Charlotte, but I primarily was the announcer at Atlanta for 14 years. Every Cup race, every IRL race, Legends races on Thursday night, anything that moved at Atlanta Motor Speedway, I was the announcer.
So is that how they do it now, or they? Because now it's the same announcers everywhere, right? Well, for NASCAR
No,
or what?
not necessarily. But SMI, Speedway Motorsports, Bruton Smith and his group, they have a group of announcers now that go to every racetrack. So no longer do they have like the Atlanta guy or the Bristol guy or the Charlotte guy. Now they've got Ken Squire, who actually trained me was Ken Squire. They have Ken Squire, and actually, I don't know who has replaced Ozzy Altman. Ozzy had a stroke, so I don't know who the other guy is that now does track announcing for them at various racetracks.
Gotcha, gotcha.
But I was caught in a political situation there. They called me from Atlanta Motor Speedway and they said, let's see, how can I say this? The person who hired me got fired. And they said they are not letting us work with anybody he hired during his tenure. So they said, this is the hardest phone call we've ever had to make, but you're a casualty, so you got to go by the wayside. So again, wrong place, wrong time, and but it was right place, right time to get in there and to get with NASCAR. So I surely enjoyed that. Craziest guy I ever met was Tony Stewart. He was always messing with you, man. I would be trying to introduce somebody, and Stewart would be poking me in the ribs, or a wet willy, or the purple nurple. I mean, Stewart was always messing with you doing something, and he and I got to be good friends. I used to do a radio show live every year, 7 days a week at 7 days during speed weeks at the Riverfront Brew Pub in Daytona. WROD in Daytona would hire me to come down, and I would do 7 nights of radio shows, all during speed weeks. And so Stewart was one of my guests on the show. And the next year, after Stewart was a guest on there, the Riverfront Brew Pub closed. And so I was talking to Stewart one day, and he said, "How about if I get you in the Home Depot? It's right across the street from the Speedway, so we could do that." So I said, "Great." So he set me up an appointment with the executives at Home Depot in Atlanta, and I went down and talked with them. And when I got done, and I said, "It's only going to cost you $5,000," and they said, "What?" They said, "We got to pay you to do it at our place." I said, "Sure." I said, "Somebody's got to pay the bills."
Yeah.
And they said, "We already give Joe Gibbs $20 million a year. We're not putting another dime in racing." And I already had all my guests lined up and everything. I mean, we were like a week away from going, and Home Depot backed out because they said, "Can you imagine what it's going to be like at Home Depot? We're going to have to hire extra security because we're going to have all these drivers there, and it's a wide open store." And they said, "We'll have to have extra security for all these hundreds of people that want to come in to listen to this show."
Yeah.
And so I could see their perspective, but still, I had to call all my guests and tell them things didn't work out and I didn't need them lined up for the show. And Stewart called me and said, "Man, I'm so sorry I got you into this deal." And I said, "Hey, I appreciate what you were doing. It's not a problem with me at all. I just appreciate you thinking about me and helping me out." So Stewart and I got to be pretty good friends. We were both remodeling our homes at the same time. And we were doing a show at Atlanta Motor Speedway together, Stewart and I were. And we were sitting there and he was complaining about the price of plywood for roof decking. And I thought, God, you're making millions of dollars a year, and here I am getting $175 to announce a race, and you're complaining about the price of plywood from Home Depot that's your sponsor? Man, get with it.
I was gonna say the remodel price that you're remodeling and the remodel price that he's remodeling might be two different things.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah.
So how did you go from going to NASCAR? I know you said that you kind of got the low side because of a political situation. How did it go from going to NASCAR to doing back to the local tracks? How can you go?
Well, I was always doing local tracks anyway. See, at NASCAR, during most of those times, we ran in early March and in November. So that was on the two ends of my local racing. So I announced local racing the whole time. I was at Lanier National Speedway for 10 years doing asphalt with the NASCAR Winston Racing Series. And I was also at Peach State for a lot of those years. They ran on Friday night. I was at Anderson Motor Speedway for a lot of those years because they ran on Friday night. So asphalt was sort of my gig. I was more of an asphalt announcer, and that was a tough decision to make. 1992, Bud Lunsford asked me would I come announce for the next season at Lanier on asphalt. And it was a very difficult decision for me to decide to leave Toccoa. I mean, I was 8 minutes from home.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I'm going to go an hour and 15 minutes to another track that I've never been to, start announcing asphalt, which I'd never done before. I didn't know if there was a difference or not. But to leave my safe confines of Toccoa and go to Lanier. And yet it was the wisest move I ever made because that's who had the attention of all the NASCAR folks. I mean, they were always in and out of Lanier. That was one of their showcase tracks. So it put me in front of the right people to be seen, to do TV, to do NASCAR, to be in. I've announced for so many different racing series. It's unreal over the years of tracks that I've visited, both asphalt and dirt. So I've just had a great opportunity. And somebody once said it's no longer is it what you know, and no longer is it who you know. Now it's who knows you.
Who
And I
knows?
think that's really the thing. It's who knows you. That's the way it is with friends on Facebook. You get to that 5,000 friends limit and you start looking down and say, who am I going to eliminate? Man,
Yeah.
I know all these people and they all know me and they're regular contributors, either from church or family or on the radio show or with my health program that I'm involved in. We're all involved. So how do I start cutting people? I've got 5,000 friends and they're really friends.
Yeah.
Nobody on there I don't know or don't need to be talking with. So I wish Facebook would extend that to 7,500 or 10,000. We need we need a few more friends.
Few more friends. But yeah, like you're saying, like I worked when I was up in North Carolina. I was able to work at the go kart track up there, and the people that I met, I didn't make I wouldn't say bad impressions. I had an awesome time. Everybody enjoyed me. I enjoyed them. The experience was amazing, and who I got to meet was a lot of fun. But I didn't take advantage of it. And I guess that'd be the sad part of it. But I got to meet um, uh, Junior's crew chief. I got to meet Denny Hamlin. I got to meet Tony Stewart. I got to meet Brad Keselowski. A lot of Bubba Wallace. A lot of those guys were going up there to practice. They would use
Sure.
the road course to the go kart track, which was GoPro Motorplex. They were using that to practice on. So I got to race with them here and there just to toy around this. They'd hop in the rental carts and toy around with them. So that was a lot of fun. But it's like you said, who knows you? And the difference is when you go to places like that. Let's say you work even in a radio show or radio booth, or you work at tracks. You get to meet a lot of people, and it's if you become a good worker or good at what you do, people will notice, and that's when you take advantage of it. The difference is I had a quote unquote career down in Georgia. We're doing racing, so I was like, I'm good. I'm gonna go back home and enjoy the local stuff, and that was the difference. You got to take advantage of what you got, which you definitely did. You were able to travel. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is travel to all these tracks. Is there any specific track that you really missed or enjoyed announcing at?
Well, I always love Atlanta. I mean, Atlanta's it's like Toccoa. It's just home for me. I miss Lanier terribly. I mean, that was one of the greatest tracks around. I miss it. I miss the old Peach State Speedway. I still wish I could announce at Anderson some. All of those tracks are great. Some of the tracks that I visited, like Newport, Tennessee, it's like a smaller version of Bristol. Concrete track that's really high banked, and it's a great little racetrack at Newport, Tennessee. Some of those tracks are wonderful. A track you may have gone to, Withville, Virginia, with Raceway. I don't know if you ever went to that track or not.
Yo,
Beautiful surroundings, and when you're in the press box, way up high in the tower, you see over the mountains, and it's just the most gorgeous views in the world there in Withville, Virginia. Just wonderful tracks like that I've had a chance to go to over the years. My favorite NASCAR track is actually Richmond. I was part of a Busch Series team back in the day. Shane Hall ran the Busch Series, and I was his PR guy.
uh-huh.
And I actually got to be part of the pit crew on a couple of occasions at Rockingham and at Richmond. But I was just a sign holder. I wasn't an over the wall guy.
Oh,
I just
I was
held
gonna
the
say,
sign
I
when
was
he
like,
came in. So I wasn't over the wall. No, didn't do that. But those were great experiences back in the Busch Grand National days, and we had so much fun with that team. And the way it was then, they closed the garage at 5 o'clock. So all the drivers and the crews and everybody hit the towns, whether it was Nashville or whether it was Rockingham or Darlington or Charlotte or wherever. We would hit the local eateries at night, and all the drivers would be eating together, and we'd be having a great time and a lot of fun. And then it was back at it again at 7 the next morning. But nobody sat and worked on race cars all night like you do at dirt tracks. We had a lot of time to get together and really enjoy each other's company.
so do you prefer asphalt announcing over dirt or dirt over asphalt?
I always tell people this. I like to go to asphalt tracks because I get paid better,
Mhm.
but I like to go to dirt tracks because the racing is more exciting and more fun to announce.
Yeah.
So make of that what you will.
No, I agree. I did on this whole when the whole iRacing thing kind of blew up over this whole Corona deal. I got enough equipment, or I upgraded my computer and stuff like that, and I've actually done a couple small broadcasting, announcing, and everything like that for some of the local races. Jamie Massey,
Yeah.
he's part of a group that does the street stocks and does money races and
Right.
stuff like that. So I've done a couple races with them. The Thunder Series, I did one or two races they were kind of hosting. So I did a couple of those, and it was a lot of fun. There was a lot going on, basically a lot to talk about. Like you said, very exciting. And I was talking to a friend of mine who most of the guys I hang out with on the racing side of the go kart world are all road course guys. They're all
Right.
asphalt road course. And I was like, man, I can do a announcing for you guys on the iRacing stuff. And I sat there and thought about it. I'm like, I feel like that'd be really hard to keep that entertaining compared to
Well,
dirt.
let me tell you this. I announce at Atlanta Motorsports Park up in Dawsonville once
Yep.
a month. I announce for them, and it's 10 o'clock in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. So it still gives me time to get to a Saturday night racetrack and do my dirt thing.
Hmm.
It's a 2 mile road course. I don't know if you've ever been to Atlanta Motorsports Park or not. Beautiful facility, really nice. And I know a couple of times I have actually said, coming out of turn 4, headed to the checkered flag, when it's actually coming out of turn 16, headed to the checkered flag. I know I've slipped up a couple of times,
Yeah.
but there's no fans, there's no grandstand. You're announcing for the people in the condos and the suites, and all you're doing is calling the cars to grid, and then occasionally you might mention something that's going on because you can't even see the whole track.
Yeah.
So you may be talking about something that's going on in the carousel, or their signature turn is turn 6. You may be talking about maybe somebody got by somebody in turn 6. And they'll have 7 cars show up in 3 different divisions. I mean, 7 cars total the whole day that are there.
Wow.
So it's not like there's a whole lot of side by side action going
Yeah.
on.
Oh yeah, that's where I was difficult when I was thinking about it. How much, even if there were bumper to bumper, it's like, oh, this guy's behind this other guy, and he's still trying. They're going into turns. I mean, I can see how difficult it is. Where that's the one thing I loved about dirt racing. Now that I've driven the asphalt, I do enjoy it. I see the strategy behind it. I see the skill, especially these endurance races. But I'm still a dirt guy. I still
Yeah.
love the side by side racing. I know when me and my dad used to talk about setting up cars. You didn't just set up. Hey, how do you set up this corner? No, that corner was throttle on entry, throttle off entry, apex, off exit, or
Yeah.
throttle on exit, and an exit. Like, you broke it up to 5 different
Right.
segments in each corner, and there's just so much to it. And that's with the announcing. Like, there's so much going on: crossovers, passing, high side, low side. I mean, it's a lot. I feel like it's a lot easier as an announcer, and I haven't even done it in a while.
Well, when I train young announcers, I try to give them a couple of pointers. Number one, when somebody spins on the track, don't yell caution because the caution may not come out.
Hmm.
Say the word trouble, because all of a sudden, when you say caution, the flagman's going to grab the yellow flag, or the scorer is going to quit scoring or something. It may not be a caution.
Hmm.
So don't say caution when a car spins. Say trouble in turn whatever. Or we got trouble on the front straightaway. So use the term trouble instead of caution unless you see the caution flag waving. Now, the second thing is, what I like to do is I introduce the starting field, and as they're coming off of turn 4, I talk until the point that the engine's crescendo as they're starting to get on the gas coming out of turn 4, and then I shut up. I let the car engines be the entertainment all the way till they get to turn 2. And then at turn 2, I pick it up again and start talking. But I let the cars be the entertainment, and I hush talking right at the crescendo of the engines, so that it sounds like it's meshed together
Yeah.
just perfectly. When I stop talking, the engines fire off. So I strategically plan that at every race. And then another thing I do, I don't believe I'm the star. And so many race announcers think they're the star of the show. The drivers, you guys are the star of the show. It's my job to make you look good and to talk about you and make you the star. I am not the star of the show. And as long as you remember that, I think you'll go far in announcing. Too many guys think that they're going to DJ the thing, and they're going to introduce songs that they play between races and this kind of stuff. And you're not there to be the star of the show. You guys are the star of the show.
Yeah, exactly. I do wedding videos on the side, and that's what I have to tell the brides and stuff like that. They go, "Are you okay?" Or like they ask me, "Did you get what you need?" And I'm like, "What? No." I said, "You're. I'm here for you." I said, "You're the star." I said, "My job
Right.
is to make you look good, whatever that means." And
Right.
it's crazy to think about of that aspect of people don't understand, or especially as a driver. I know even down there, it was so much fun to hang out with you, to talk with you, and you were a star to me of the stuff you did, and to me, I was a nobody. I didn't do a lot of stuff. I didn't do a lot of racing. I was still new to the sport, and the places you've been, the people you talked to, was just so exciting. And you're still, by the end of the day, still talked about me because I was the driver. And that's like you're
Right.
saying, is your job is to make the drivers still look good.
Right. Let me tell you another road racing story right quick. I was announcing at Road Atlanta. We were doing a broadcast, a telecast for Speed Vision back in the days before Speed. It was Speed Vision,
Hmm.
and they brought Bobby Allison in to be my color commentator that day, and we could only see turn. I don't know, it was 12 and 13, and then back up to turn one. That's all we could see. They had no cameras for us to see any other part of the course. So Bobby and I would sit there and talk, and all of a sudden, here'd come the cars off turn 11, the trucks. It was truck racing. We'd talk about the trucks coming off turn 11, and there was like 25 trucks, and they were all in a tight wad. And we would talk about them until they vanished off of turn two, and then we'd just sit and chat for about 2 more minutes till all of a sudden they come off turn 13 again. It was really kind of funny because there was a whole lot more of us talking and chatting than there was actual video of the trucks coming around. But that was a lot of fun with Bobby Allison to do that.
So, was there ever a track that you wish that you never been to that you wished you have gone or wished you did announce at?
Hmm.
Any bucket list tracks?
I've wanted to announce at Talladega,
Okay.
um, just because it has that extra little bit of mystery of who's going to be leading in the middle of the grandstand and then who's going to be leading at the start finish line, which is down in turn one. I think that adds so much drama to it to have that extra. And of course, that's why Bill France did that when he built it. He put the start finish line way down in turn one. So it's very interesting to see that he did that. Many times, the guy that's the leader right there in front of the grandstand where the flag stand normally is not the guy who wins the race by the time they get to turn one. So I just kind of like that little bit of drama.
Is there a class at all the classes you've watched or announced, from asphalt or dirt? Is there any specific car that you enjoy watching, announcing, racing, whatever you consider it as?
Probably because I've seen him race so long, and he's a very close friend of mine. I love Modified Street, and Billy Buffington is one of my closest friends. He's in my Sunday school class, and I just always like to see Billy out there in his number 10. And it doesn't matter. I never, obviously, as an announcer, I never pull for anybody or let anybody know anything like that. But I always hope Billy wins the race, no matter who he's racing against. He is always my favorite. He's just a great friend, and we've done business together. We've done family things together. And like I said, he's even in my Sunday school class at church. So I always pull for the number 10. And Modified Street is my favorite division to watch because they still kind of look like cars
Yeah,
that were made back in the 80s. I kind of like that look.
that's a tough class. So when I was at I'm gonna call it the top of my game at one point in time, that I got to drive a couple different things. I was even able to race a modified legend car, which was a awesome experience. But I had two people actually offer me to race. Well, I've raced one night and drove another, a modified street, and I earned a big respect for them because I went from go karts to a late model. There was no in
Yeah.
between. It was a huge jump. To most people, it was a mind blowing jump, but to me, it was just from go karts to cars. It was, I wouldn't say nothing because I was scared for my life, but that's all I knew was late models. And I got so used to the four link suspension and the axle moving and the front and the body roll, and I just got so used to how that car felt and acted, and I was kind of became connected to it, so I made easier adjustments. And when they offered me that modified ride, I said, "Hey, can you drive it at night?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can handle it. I drive a late model." Back then, or I say back then is a couple years ago. When they would say, "Hey guys, come on the track. I need you to prep the track." All those late model guys would be like, nope. You all you little cars can do it. We're late models."
Right.
But I learned a huge respect for the modified streets and what it takes to handle those cars. I think the guys that are like Buffington and
Rusty Jordan.
Rusty Jordan, I think they have their
Yeah.
cars dialed in really well, and it fits them, and that's what makes them so good. But I know it's not like a late model. I know that you do have to manhandle that a little bit more than you do a late
Right.
model. So
Yeah, and you can actually see it on the track. If you watch them, you can actually see those cars enter the corner differently. They go through the corner differently, and they come off the corner differently. So different than a late model does. So there's quite a bit of difference in suspension and in the way that the driver has to respond to what the car is doing.
Correct. Yeah, and I think the adjustments they make, they in the late models you have a lot more adjustments you can make, where the street stocks you don't have as many. In late
Right.
models you have so many fine tuned adjustments, and if that doesn't work, we can change it to this, or we have for this function I have 5 different options to do. So I feel like the modified streets, your window of opportunity is a lot smaller.
Yeah. Yeah.
So during the NASCAR year, when you were doing that for 14 years, they let you travel all the way to China for a deal that you had going on, or they had going on with China. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I was actually I was working for the Chinese government. I was trying to bring. Here's how it came down. I was at a seminar in Thailand for selling from the platform. That's what we're learning to do, is how to sell from the platform, like these people that sell their books or they sell whatever from the platform. And you fill an arena and you're trying to sell as many of those things as you can. I was actually taking a seminar on doing that while I was in Thailand. Well, a guy had just come from China, and he said the Chinese government is trying to figure out how they can sell more cars. They consider their cars as utilitarian as we consider our lawnmowers. They just run a car till it dies and then buy another one. They don't wash them. They don't take care of them. They just consider it a utilitarian item. And I said the only way you're going to get them to really fall in love with their automobile is to have a muscle car kind of era, something where they really like them. And I said the best way to do that is start a racing program. Well, he called the Chinese government and mentioned that to them, and they said, does this guy have ties to NASCAR? And he said, yeah, he does. So all of a sudden, I become this liaison between NASCAR and the Chinese government. So what happened with that is Brian France had just said, we're looking at going into China. So I thought, here's my opportunity, man.
Yeah.
France, the president of NASCAR, said, we're going to go to China. I am in China right now, and I'm talking to the government leaders in the city of Shenyang, which is like our Detroit. That's where all the cars and trucks are made, in Shenyang. And so the Shenyang government gave me 60,000 square kilometers of land to build a racetrack on for a dollar for a 99-year lease. And so I wound up with this 60,000 acres to build a racetrack on. And while we're there, my wife, Debbie, just says to me, she said, can't you just see all these RVs lined up down by the river down here? And I said, yeah, and they'll all have big number 3 flags, and they'll be saying, go Anahat, go Anahat. And we were laughing about that. And one of the Chinese leaders came and said, what is RV? And Debbie said, it's like a motel room on wheels. And they had never heard the term RV, or recreational vehicle, before. So we did not get the deal with NASCAR. I went and talked with Grant Lynch over at Talladega. He was the one they put in charge of international development. So I had a meeting with Grant at Talladega. We went through it several times, and he finally said, look, NASCAR is not interested in going to China. Brian shouldn't have said that. We have researched it thoroughly, and we're not interested in doing it. But what happened was I wound up carrying Coachman, who is the manufacturer of motorhomes. I wound up carrying Coachman back to China, and I introduced them to the people at Jinbei. Jinbei is the biggest truck manufacturer in China, partially owned by the Chinese government. And Coachman built a building on the Jinbei grounds, and when the truck chassis would come out, they would put the RV coaches on top of them. And the Chinese government wound up building what we would call state parks. They wound up building by all of their major rivers these big parks with full hookups for RVs. So my wife, through that offhanded remark, actually created the RV industry in China, and we were able to follow that up and take Coachman over there. So it was a great deal. We made a few dollars off of that little deal with the Chinese and taking Coachman, and it saved Coachman. I think they've now gone bankrupt, but it saved them for about 10 more years, not bringing stuff from China over here, but us taking them over there so that Coachman could stay alive for a few more years before they finally had to go bankrupt. But it was a big deal for Coachman, and obviously a big deal for the Chinese government. My wife was saying the other day, she said, I'm just not really an outgoing person. I've never really done much in life. I said, you've changed the culture of an entire country. What are you talking about?
I was going to say, around what year was this?
This was in probably 2006, 2007, maybe.
Gotcha.
I had made several trips to China, and just really enjoyed the Chinese people. They were so gracious to me, and everywhere we went, we had the flags on the front of the cars, and we'd run 100 miles an hour, and it was just a lot of great fun. So we were just treated like royalty by the Chinese people always, and it wasn't any kind of a problem whatsoever. They were awfully gracious and nice. And I'll tell you, if you got time for another quick story, you got time for one more quick
Oh
story?
yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
We were standing in now you have to consider a mayor of a city in China is like a governor in the United States.
Hmm.
There's 7 and 8 million people in these towns. So they're larger than New York City, each town is. And so we're standing in the mayor's office of one of these towns in China, and it's a female mayor. And I saw a piece of sheet music on her desk, and it was John Denver's, um, uh, not Country Roads, uh, West Virginia Mountain Mama, take me home. Yeah, take me home, Country Roads. That's what it was. And I said, "What's this sheet music doing here? It's written in English." And she spoke English with a German accent. She had been taught by Germans, so she was
Wow.
kind of funny in her English. But she said they had a spring festival there, and two of the people in the audience in her office
Oh,
actually played guitar and sang that song at the festival in English. And they can't say the word river like Shenandoah River. They say Shenandoah River. They can't pronounce V's. So she wanted us to sing the song, and she wanted to look at how our mouths moved whenever we said the word river because they can't say that.
oh my
And so it was
gosh.
so funny to be standing behind us was this Chinese flag, and we had a guitar. We were playing it, and we were singing for this lady, "Take Me Home, Country Roads" by John Denver, just so she could see how our mouths
Just to
moved.
see that.
And that was just a crazy, crazy story.
So, this show, the reason for this show is it's called the Man Cave Hobby Show because what I want to do is basically learn about a bunch of people's hobbies, how they made it into a career, just like yours. Because announcing, yeah, you get paid from it, but I feel like in the beginning, it is more of a hobby. The stuff you do, the process you get ready for, what you're really giving out. If you're especially brand new, I think nowadays most of the brand new people are like, hey, I'll just do it for free. Just let me get up
Right.
there and get started. So it becomes a hobby, but you have made it into a career or a job or basically made it successful. But my question I wanted to ask is, how do you get started? How how would you tell somebody that says, hey, I'd like to start announcing or I want to get ready towards, how would you get them to get started? I guess just get started is where I'm looking at, as in grab a mic, go to a track, meet a guy, just start
Uh,
talking, or
just start showing up. Start showing up and start showing up. I've got a guy right now that works for the Weather Channel that I'm training to be an announcer. We need announcers. If you look at the announcing booths everywhere, most of the guys are 65 years old or older.
hmm.
We need young announcers badly. We're begging for them. And that's why I have to announce at 3 tracks. Hartwell has no announcer. So when Toccoa is off this year, I go to Hartwell every weekend just to sub because they have nobody to do it. And I've tried to find them an announcer. We can't find anybody. So I'm doing 2 tracks that run on the same night just to try to help them out on nights when Toccoa doesn't run.
Yeah.
So we're needing young announcers badly. Just show up at a track, show up, walk into the tower, and say, "I'd like to learn how to do this," and I will teach you everything that I know. I just
Mhm.
know what I've done.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, it's gonna be a
but
trial. It's
I
gonna
will
be a
teach you
trial and
everything I
error
know.
thing. It's gonna
Yeah,
be something that you're what you learn. I wouldn't say. I'm gonna say this lightly because you're gonna correct. I would appreciate if you correct me, but it's not really what you know. It's what you learn. It's not what you know to do. It's what you learn not to do.
that's right.
It's the
And
mistakes.
and the biggest thing is like when I was minister of music at church. The biggest thing is showing up.
Hmm.
Just promise you'll be there every week.
Yeah.
That's the main thing is just be there every week and show that you've got the perseverance to do that. The radio show, that's something we haven't even talked about really. The radio show has been on the air 30 years now that I've been doing the Champ Show. And I know a lot of times you'll see me and you'll call me, "Hey, Champ." But the reason it's called the Champ Show, it's not because you got to win to be on it. It stands for Charles Head's American Motorsports Program. I created that acronym many, many years ago just so people would remember the term Champ Show. And it doesn't mean you got to win. It's just the abbreviations of Charles Head's American Motorsports Program.
Oh my goodness, I did not know that. And yeah,
Yeah,
it's kind of when I say the champ, it's because it's the same way with Hot Rod Le Mans. Is that's how I've always known you is just champ. So I was like, hey champ, just because
right.
like you said, it's that acronym. That's awesome.
Well, a lot of the NASCAR drivers know me by that because I would have them on the show over the years.
Mhm.
And Elliott Sadler's one that comes to mind. I could not walk in the garage area without Elliott Sadler hollering, "Hey, champ! Hey, champ!" So you just kind of get used to that. But that's why it's named that. It's not because you got to be a winner to be on the show
So how often do you do these shows? You do every Thursday for the whole year,
every
or
Thursday night.
And
Yeah,
what do you
it
eat
has
during off
changed
season?
nights over the years. And tomorrow night show, we're doing this on Wednesday. Tomorrow night show on Thursday night is my special show that I'm celebrating my 50th year in broadcasting. So I've got congratulatory messages from all these people that I've worked with over the years. The very first day I was on radio back in 1970, up to people that I've worked with ever since, and some very, very notable people that have gone in their careers sky high that I've worked with, and they're going to be doing congratulatory messages. So tomorrow night's going to be a special show.
What's the best way to get to your show to get on?
Facebook, if you're not within the North Atlanta, our signal goes from South Atlanta to Augusta, to Gaffney, South Carolina, to Gatlinburg, Tennessee. So we got a big listening audience, 99.3 FM. But if you're not on that, you can always go to my Facebook page, Charles Head, and find the one that says NASCAR announcer, and that will be me. I'm friends with 5 Charles Heads. 2 of which I have worked with at racetracks, oddly enough, over the years. But anyway, I'm the one that says NASCAR announcer on there.
Well, I'm gonna wrap it up with this. What's it take to be an announcer? I know we kind of talked about showing up and basically just being there, but what is your process of getting ready for a race, like for this coming up weekend?
Uh, be excited. If you're excited, the fans will be excited. Don't scream. I think that's one of the first things that I learned is whenever something big's happening on the racetrack, don't scream. Just be excited and lift your voice in an excited manner, but don't scream. I see announcers that do that all the time, and it just doesn't come over well. There's no need for that. You do prep. As many races as I see, I'm doing a Carolina Clash race this weekend. I don't know much about the drivers in the Carolina Clash. So once we get off here tonight, I'm calling the guy who normally announces for them that can't be there this weekend, and I'm going to get a rundown of all their drivers, who's in the top 5, who's had wins this year, and just do a little bit of background.
Okay.
Oddly enough, when you do a local series, they provide you with a book this thick on all the stats of all the drivers and this kind of stuff. You just got gobs of information. When you go do a NASCAR race, they give you 0. They expect you to know everything when you come in. So I have to do all my research online, and I carry a pad with me. This driver finished in this race last year in this position. Last season, he finished this place in points. Here's how he's finished the last 3 races. I mean, I have all of that information to go with. So they expect you to know your stuff when you go to a NASCAR race, whereas lesser divisions, they just give you all the information in front of you when you get there.
That's what one of my memorable moments was when I went to Toccoa and I did that. It was the race that David Smith hosted at Toccoa Speedway. That was the turkey,
Right.
the turkey race. That was my biggest win of my career, and it was a great night from start to finish. It was a 3-day weekend. Had so much fun. But the one thing I remember is the track record. Technically, I beat the track record that night with a 12.3 or 12.2, but it was during the race, and that was funny because I was asking them about it. I said, hey, what's the track record here? And they had to pull the book out or had to get their information that they store
Right.
for all that kind of stuff. And they said, oh, it's a 13.5, I think it is, or 12.5 for the crates.
I don't know. I've got 'em. I've got all the track records at all the tracks stored in my phone, so I know what they are everywhere I go.
That way you get to keep an eye on it, and that's why
That's right.
they said I think it's a 12.5 or 12.4, and I think it was held by Hot Rod LeMans, I believe. But I was so excited. I was like, yes! I said that. Forget the win. I mean, the win was the biggest race of my career, but I said I just want that record. But it didn't
Yeah.
count because it was during
Right.
the race.
Got to be qualifying.
Exactly. And so I was bummed out, but I was crazy I was thinking about all these tracks people go to and all these track records and all these wins and how they store it and how they keep on track of it. And for announcers like you, when you're talking about all the notes and information that I expected for places to have it, like like you said, the local tracks does, but I would have thought the NASCAR race would be able to provide that for you or anything like that.
They give you 0. You don't know anything. And if it's a strange car that you're not familiar with, until they cross the line and go on to the race monitor, you don't have any idea at all who's in the car. They don't give you any information.
Wow. So do you have any traditions before a race that you kind of do every race? Like, hey,
Mhm.
I bring this item just because it helps me, or
No, not really. One of the things that I do before every race, I get there a couple hours early, and I always go by every driver's pit area and talk with them and find out what's going on in their families, what's going on with their car. We just talk in general. I want to know their names of their wives and their kids and their dogs. I mean, I want to get to know these guys, and I want them to know that I know them personally. I think that's real important. I can share a lot of that information as we go along, and throughout the night, if they've just found out they're expecting, or they had a new baby last week, or whatever. It just adds flavor to the announcing that night to let people know a little more about their personal lives.
I noticed that too with the podcasting I've started doing and some of the small announcing I've done and the videos I've done. That it seems like the best way to get prepared, or a way I should say to get prepared, is kind of getting in the moment. As in, for these podcasts, when I was talking to somebody else, to have a normal conversation beforehand, kind of get in the moment of just chatting back and forth. When you're at the track, talking to these people, of getting in the moment of racing, getting their background. Hey, how you guys doing? I feel like getting in the moment. Not you just went through a whole work week, Monday through Friday, dealing with work, thinking about work and everything like that. Maybe going to the track and getting mentally prepared of basically tonight's event.
Well, I have a signature that I always had when I was doing with NASCAR. You could tell it was me because my signature sound was, and now, ladies and gentlemen. I always said, and now. No other announcer did that, but that was my little signature thing that I did. So if somebody heard, and now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome, or whatever, that's my signature sound that I do that nobody would think anything about because it's so subtle. But I'm the only person that I know of that says, and now, ladies and gentlemen, get ready for tonight's main event, or whatever. That's my thing. Is
Signature.
that puts me in the moment when I say, and now, I'm in Mr. Announcer mode.
Wow. Well, Charles, man, I greatly appreciate it. You're definitely one on my list. I was super excited to interview and talk to, and the memories and stories that you have really just blow my mind, and it's super exciting. And I greatly appreciate you coming on tonight. Like you said, if anybody out there wants to watch a show every Thursday night, 99.3. Or Facebook, whichever is easiest for you guys to get to. Definitely watch a show. All the racers, or the local racers that are on there. It's a lot, really exciting to hear how the race was past weekend, and especially this coming up week should be pretty exciting to hear all the people that you've talked to that have touched you and made it these 50 years, and hopefully another 50 more. But Charles, thanks again, man.
Thanks, Kyra. It's great to talk with you. Good to see you, and want to see you back at the racetrack soon. We really do.
Definitely. I'm going to have to come up there. I have not been up there this year, but I promised at least to stay in touch. I want to come up there 1 year, and the only place that I think I'll probably travel to would be back to Toccoa, because that's still my home track. I love the Davidsons, that they're awesome to hang out with. But, Charles, I greatly appreciate it. As for everybody out there, this is the Man Cave Hobby Show. Stay in touch.